Hello, my name is Hakon, and today I'm going to say a little bit about Bandcamp. Um, First of all, you may often have heard people throw around things like pop music is dead, and rock is dead, and music is dead. It all sounds the same, everything is compressed, so you lose all dynamics. It's all written by the same songwriters with the same four chords, and the music industry has just become really homogeneous and boring. And while some of these things might be true, it's a very tiny little part of the music that is made that is affected by these things because more than ever, music has become democratized. Anyone can make music, produce music, compose music, arrange music, and publish music practically for free these days. You just need a computer or a phone, and that's it. Otherwise, you can use free applications. You can use free virtual instruments. That is, instruments on a phone or a computer. Um, you can use the phone as a microphone, etc. It's all you need is there. This is the golden age of music making because it's democratized. Anyone and everyone who wants to make music and to express themselves through music can do it, and many of them do. So there are places online like Bandcamp, YouTube, SoundCloud, probably lots of others as well, where anyone and everyone can showcase their music. And music is more varied and more interesting than ever before. It's just that the charts have become homogeneous and boring. And chart music has become homogeneous and boring and auto-tuned and, yeah, compressed to death. So it is the golden age of music making. All styles of music are being made. I mean, new music is being made in every single style that ever existed, and this is also true for other kinds of artistic expression like painting. All styles that ever existed are being done today by new artists. Um, and so it is a wonderful time to be alive, to experience music. You just have to know where to look and what to look for, or just go treasure hunting to see what you find just by chance if you go to places like Bandcamp or SoundCloud. So I think Bandcamp is probably one of the best platforms for music now because it is a way for people to not only showcase their music but also for people to buy their music. They can also buy merchandise like t-shirts and, well, CDs. That's CDs, vinyl, cassettes quite in vogue these days. And you can sell all those things through your Bandcamp page. So Bandcamp is an absolutely amazing platform, and it's a even if hardly anyone listens to your music there, which is the case for my music. I mean, it is there. It is available for people to play and to buy if they want to. Um, but not that many people do, which is fine. It is out there, and it's sort of my contribution to, well, to the world, as it were. And somebody might stumble upon it and find it interesting and say, "Oh, yeah, okay, that's has added something to my life." I sort of felt something there when I heard that. Um, so it's all about the means of self-expression are there, and lots of people are using them, and you don't have to. You can ignore the charts completely, and all the interesting stuff is somewhere else. So, and the reason I'm talking about this now is that over the last week I've been tidying a lot in my music files. I've got some sort of just sound recordings. I've got quite a few sort of half-baked projects, not products, projects that I've been working on or started working on when I was just noodling away a little bit. I have more than 100 compositions that I've sort of made the chord progression and the melody line and sometimes the harmony line and the bass line, and I just need to arrange them in some interesting way. So there's so many things that I've got that I can be doing with music. And also I realized that on YouTube I've got quite a few pieces of music on YouTube I don't have on Bandcamp because I've been making music every time I make a Xenodream animation, and every time I did a back in the day when I did Amazon reviews. I did stop motion animations with some of the products that I reviewed, and of course they had a soundtrack which was both music and sound effects sort of rolled into one. So I've got those, and I was thinking I was going to have a little bit of an upload spree to Bandcamp very soon. But before I do, I thought I'd just run through what I've got on Bandcamp already for you. Just say something about the different pieces, some of the inspiration for it, some of the choices I made, a little bit about the cover design as well, because that is also a big part of it for me now, because I quite enjoy doing that. Because it merges my interest in art, design, and music all together. And also some of my later work, it also includes a bit of poetry as well, which I think is another nice thing that I like including. And I'm trying to sort of merge all these creative things that I like doing into one, which means poetry, music, and art into one. And I will do more of that as I go along. So I will, if I can find my screen recorder, I can see if I can get Bandcamp up and running here. So I should have prepared this beforehand, of course. Right, so there we are. Okay, so now I'm recording my screen, so you should be able to see this any moment now. So this is Bandcamp, and this is my page on Bandcamp. Not a busy page, but it's mine, and it's got some of my tracks on it. On Bandcamp, I'll just say a bit more about Bandcamp. One of the great things about Bandcamp is that it's a very direct way for artists to showcase and sell their music to people, instead of going via a music publisher or distributor, and then from those again to places like Spotify, Amazon, or iTunes. You're actually cutting out one of the middlemen, at least, and the only middleman is Bandcamp. That's the platform, which means they just take a little cut. They take a commission rather than a big chunk, and you make more money potentially from sales as long as people go to Bandcamp to buy your music. So I think it's a great platform for anyone, and I know lots of established musicians, they also like using Bandcamp. Oh, excuse me, got no, nothing important. I was planning to leave my phone on silent, but then I saw somebody tried calling me 3 times, so I just had to put the sound on now. So I may get a call, and I may have to do a cut today, so I'll see what happens. It's the last bit of my tea there. Okay, so Bandcamp. So you can put singles up on Bandcamp, just a single song or single track, which is what I do most of the time. And also you can do albums, which I think I should be doing, but I just haven't sorted my songs into albums yet. And sometimes I feel I don't have a full album's worth of tracks that go together in a coherent way yet. So I think I'll just say something about the different ones. Now, you might notice the first 3 here, they don't have the most interesting cover designs, because I hadn't really thought much about it yet when I did these. I'll just put the first one up here. Okay, so this is the Ballad of Sinclair. This is an old Norwegian song that was, I wouldn't say hijacked, but it was borrowed by the Faroese, and it was modified a little bit because they wanted to use it for their dancing thing. And in the Faroe Islands, they have a kind of sort of chain dance style thing they do. And this is one of those songs that they can sing when they're doing that dance. And in order to do that, they needed to add a chorus with a slightly different rhythm to the verse and modify the melody a little bit as well, which sounds so much better than the original version, by the way, to such an extent that if you find this song in a Norwegian songbook now, you are most likely to find the Faroese version rather than the Norwegian one. Now, what the story is about is in 1612, there was a war. Sweden was at war with Denmark, and Norway was part of Denmark at the time. And in wars in those days, it was quite common for people to be... most countries didn't have a large standing army, so they would have mercenaries as well coming to fight for them. And in this case, there were some Scottish mercenaries, and it was the clan Sinclair, which I'll do an interesting aside now. I'll do an interesting aside. Sinclair, when you think about it, is Saint Clair, which is a French name, Saint Clair. And because the reason is lots of noblemen and also some of these heads of clans in Scotland, they were originally from Normandy, because there was a Norman barons that came and were given land in Britain to control it, to help control it after the Norman invasion. And so the Sinclairs were, of course, from Normandy, but of course the Normans, they were from Norway. So they went full circle, as it were. They went from Norway, they got to Normandy, and then they went to Britain, and then these people went back to Norway, and of course they got killed because they did not expect to have any kind of opposition in Norway. The Sinclairs, or the clan and his men, when he, or Lord Sinclair. And so the ballad is about how these mercenaries that came across from Scotland, from Caithness to Norway, they wanted to go through Norway to get to Sweden to help them out, and they got basically massacred on the way. In the song, which is kind of a romanticized version of events, all of them died, but of course in the true story, a few of them survived to tell the tale. And this song sort of became quite a strong. It was actually just before national romanticism came about in Norway, and of course at the time this was while Norway was still part of Denmark. It was a province of Denmark. But it was sort of starting to get to that stage where people wanted independence. They wanted the national identity to be stronger, and these kinds of songs were sort of part of that. And it still, to this day, is part of the same kind of movement in the Faroe Islands, because they are still partly ruled by Denmark, of course, and there is an independence movement. They want to be completely independent of Denmark, and this is one of those songs that expresses that wish to be free. So it's quite a lovely song. This was maybe another little point as well. The reason I started doing a lot of music again, because I've always liked doing music. I used to play the recorder. I started playing the recorder when I was about 21 years old. So I've been doing it for quite some time, sort of on and off. And when I moved to Scotland and I opened my own gallery and I wanted to try to make money from my art full time, I decided that art, which was one of those things I'd been doing as a spare time hobby, suddenly was becoming work. And in order to separate work from hobbies, I wanted to do more of another hobby. And I decided on music as the hobby of choice. That I would do without any sort of view to making money from it, and which I still do. I don't plan to or expect to ever make money from my music. And so this was 2012, and I sort of bought a few virtual instruments. And one of the ones I came across was called Era. And basically what it is samples of medieval instruments. So you got like your Celtic harp, you got your lutes, you got different kinds of drums, frame drums. You got your sort of string, your sort of pre-Baroque string predecessors, like your sort of pre-fiddle kind of, called a fiddle or something like that. Viola da gamba. There's different instruments like that. There's some horns, and of course there's sort of the trumpets without the keys. So all those kinds of things. Hurdy Gurdy, quite a big part of the sound of some of my tracks. And of course all those sounds go really well together with recorder, because they just have that matching timbres, and of course they were used together at some point in history as well. So when I found that virtual instrument library, it became a lot easier for me to actually make arrangements with a recorder that I thought sounded good enough to put up in a place like Bandcamp. and this was the first one I did that I really liked. So one thing I also like doing when I make these arrangements, I'll just say a bit about percussion, because in medieval times, and of course in sort of in folk music, it was quite common for the percussion always to be on the beats. I like doing syncopated percussion, so I sort of played around with it a little bit, and it's even more noticeable in the next song we're going to talk about. But without too much further ado, I'll just play a little bit of this for you. And I'll say a little bit more about it. I just need to use my headphones now so I can hear what's going on. So let's start. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start there, or to stop rather, at the end of the first verse. So that's also I like in these kinds of songs. I think it sounds really good to sort of start with a harp, and because it defines, I can use it to both define the melody and the chords as well. So I made some nice sort of harp arrangements, I feel, in some of these tracks. Hurdy Gurdy, I really like the sound of Hurdy Gurdy, and that's Louina McKennett's credit, I suppose, because she likes using hurdy-gurdy in lots of her music, although she uses it quite subtly, and you might actually miss it if you don't know what you're looking for. And it's quite a nice hurdy-gurdy sound you get in this this instrument library that I've been using together with the recorders here. So yeah, it's quite an enjoyable tune to play, especially I like the rhythm change as well when you're going into the chorus at the end. Quite a nice song. Cover is of course a bit boring here. I really like that font, but I didn't really know what I was going for yet. And I sort of kept the same style for the next one. Lovman och Tor. So this is basically means Lovman and Tor. It's just two names. And this is a story. It's a medieval ballad, so it's even a lot older than the previous one. And this is your typical story of boy meets girl. They want to get married. Boy is a bit poor. Boy has to go to sea to make money so he can come back and marry his sweetheart. Sweetheart's family, they are keen to marry her off, and of course she doesn't have much of a say in it, and so they arrange a wedding with a rich man, and she waits and she waits and she procrastinates and she procrastinates, and she manages to prolong the wedding to such an extent that her sweetheart, he comes back from sea just in time, and he hurries to the wedding and he gets to marry her instead. Quite an old story. There were lots of these stories going around in medieval times around Europe, and you would have heard some kind of version of this or other at some point. And this is quite a nice catchy melody, I think. I did have to change this melody a little bit because it's a little bit sort of feels a bit unresolved in places, and I also added a counter melody and a harmony at the end as well. Now, in this one, I did something interesting with the percussion. Of course, it's syncopated, as I like doing, but also I did actually let the pattern of I can't remember exactly what it is now. I think because the melody is in a 4/4 time signature, and I think maybe I did 6/4 for the percussion. I can't really tell for sure now. I definitely did something else with it, which means it's always a little bit sort of it gets a bit off, but it gets off in the right places, and it sounds really nice, I think. And one of the things it also does is it adds a little bit of that urgency to it, because of the story. There is an urgency to it, especially towards the end when he gets to shore and he is being told, the first thing he gets told when he reaches shore is that his sweetheart is getting married, and so he just trades his ship and everything on it and just trades it for a horse, and he rides as fast as the wind to get back to get to where the wedding is so he can marry her instead. And of course the would-be husband, the one who was supposed to marry her, he was actually okay with it. Funny story, actually. He says, "Oh yeah, that's all right then, if I get to marry your sister instead." Yeah, it's a kind of a weird story that way. But let's listen to that as well. I just need to plug in my headphones. Starting with a harp again. Yeah, I think that's enough, and I think I just realized I can mute the sound from the screen recording, or they're not just screen recording, but the recording of my camera to the computer, and so that might solve the feedback issue. And I won't have to unplug my headphones all the time. Oh. So yeah, again using the harp in the beginning to define first the melody, and then of course the chord progression as well with the arpeggios, and then going into the no Hurdy Gurdy in this one. Now those are the only two tracks like this I have on my Bandcamp for now, but I do have a few more that I've made that I probably should go there. I'll certainly one of them, so I'll add more soon. Anyway, so next track. When I started deciding that I wanted to do music as a hobby, one of the things I did was, of course, to research and look into what kind of virtual instruments should I get. And a name that sort of kept cropping up was virtual instruments by virtual synthesizers by Uhe, or Uhi, as you would say in English, I guess, which is a German maker of virtual instruments. His name is Urs Heckmann, hence Uhe, and I believe he's based in Berlin, he and his team of Uhe Software, and they make some of the best synthesizers you can get on the computer. Certainly some of the most popular ones, the ones that are the most mentioned. People like using them. People like the sound of them, and they also make one that is or a few that are very close to actual analog equipment, because it is modeling the components of an analog synthesizer rather than trying to replicate the sound. So, but of course, that is quite processor heavy. So, my way of working, or used to be a way of working, I still do it, of course. When I sit down to sort of try different sounds on a virtual synthesizer, I just change the preset, and I found a different sound, and I just play a bit on the keyboard, see what happens. And sometimes the sound itself dictates a certain rhythm or a melody. It has a certain feel to it, a certain groove to it, and you sort of get into that very quickly when you hear the sound. So the sound itself becomes the inspiration for music, and this is how many of my synthesizer pieces actually came about, because I was just playing around with presets on my computer. And this is one of those. I found this sound that was quite nice, and I played around with the arpeggiator settings, or the sequencer settings for this one. So and I just came upon this really nice rhythm and nice intervals. And this was before I really knew music theory to the extent that I couldn't make my own chord progression at this time. Now I know more about how chords work, which helps a lot. I'll get back to that later. But I knew that if I sort of transposed up by a fifth, and then down again, and then down again, and then maybe down a major second, and up again, it sounded nice. I usually did that when I was making my tracks. So this one is some production for powers in this one, but like the bass being panned, I think. But otherwise, I think this makes quite a nice arrangement. It's a nice combination of sounds. I just did a very sort of very gentle filter sweep, some stereo effect as well. Just a very subtle one, quite a gradual one over quite a long time. And one thing I did here as well when I was making it, I was the cover here. I'll just say something about the cover as well before I say that. I just like this font, and I noticed that it just sort of lined up really well with as a block when I was making it. I see I had to make the top line a little bit bigger, it looks like. And the bottom here, that is actually the MIDI track of the main theme of this melody. You can see the rhythm, short, long, long, short, medium, medium, short, long, medium, short, short, etc. Yeah, so you'll hear it when I started now. And I think this would make sort of a nice sort of dance floor track. I quite like it. It's I think it's catchy. I think it's got a certain sort of vibe to it, and also a nice energy to it. Let's have a quick listen to this. Purely electronic now. yeah, I think that's a good place to take a break from that one. So yeah, it hasn't really got started there yet, but it's sort of getting into it. And one thing I also did here was once I've made the arpeggiator in the synthesizer, I also sort of took that theme and took it out and did some modifications on it with a different sound as well, to sort of layer with it. And I think it sounds quite nice. Right, next one. This is, now it's a bit later. This is some September 2016. In 2016, I think it was in 2016, that is when I finally realized how chord progressions work. Because before that, I could sort of hum a melody and it would sound okay, but it sometimes would be a little bit off. And I didn't realize why until I figured out chord progressions, because the thing is that a melody doesn't exist in isolation. It exists as in relation to a scale and in relation to a chord within that scale. And so when you change a chord, the meaning of a note, the feeling of a note, the relationship of the note to the chord is different to what it was before. Even if it's the same note, if it's a C followed by a C, if you change the chord, that second C will sound very different. And also if you do a key change, it sounds even more different, of course. So some of those things I do when I compose is I also like to modulate into from major to minor or vice versa, and keeping it in the same. So if I go from C major to C minor and back again to C major or minor, major, minor, and when I do the actual transition from one key to another, I usually also do it on the same note. That is, I usually put two notes. Very often I do it, but two notes after each other, and one is in one key and the other is in a different key. Same note, but it sounds very different because of the key change. Because this is how most music is. Certainly, most pop music works this way. It's if you remove the chords, it sometimes can sound really boring actually, because it's the chords that are defining what the note and the melody means, and it gives it so much more energy and dynamics. At least that's some kind of dynamic still left in pop music. This is quite an unusual piece for me because it's really slow. Most of my pieces are about 105 beats per minute. I think that's all, 90 or 105. I don't know why I landed on those. I quite like the sound of those. I've got quite a few on 105. My digital audio workstation defaults to 120, I think, so then I reduce it to 105 very often when I start working. This one I believe is 30. I can't remember for sure now, off the top of my head. And this is one of those melodies that I listen to when I'm feeling a bit stressed. If I'm feeling tired but not sleepy and I want to just relax and wind down before sleeping, it's one of those that can make me relax. If I want to fall asleep, I'll sometimes just put this one on and I'm asleep before the end of it. I do have some other songs that I use for that as well, and I will make a separate video about that because there's a special artist I want to lift up and elevate and bring attention to that I think more people should hear about, and I'll do another video about that. So piano, this is on piano, and this also has the interesting feature of being one of the few piano pieces I've composed that I can actually play, because my playing isn't that good. But this one, just after a few tries, I was actually able to play this one once I made the sheet music for it, and with the left and the right hand. Because it is so slow, it's not that hard to play, but of course it needs to be played with feeling, which is something I'm good at. I'm just not very good at playing in time or playing quickly. But I can't play with feeling, definitely. I really struggle with tempo and rhythm. Not my thing at all. So yeah, so this is very simple chord progression. I was working on the chord progression and I wanted to do, and I was also at the same time I was just sort of playing just randomly on the keyboard, and I thought, oh, that sounds quite nice. And so I think I kept some of my sort of live playing, but I changed the notes to go with the and I sort of took that the general pattern of what I came up with when I was improvising and I moved it into a chord progression, and I made a nice slow sound of it. So a lot of this was actually played as an improvised piece when I made it. And another thing about this one, I'll just say a little bit about piano sound. Now, most pianos you get for on the computer, virtual instrument pianos, are sample libraries. That is to say that they have been recorded from an actual piano. Usually you have very different velocity levels, so if you push a key a bit harder, then you get a different recording, actually, not just a slightly higher volume of the same recording. The one I'm using is called Piano Tech, and it's different in that it is a physically modeled piano. So instead of sampling a piano, there are ways to calculate exactly what happens sonically when a piano is played. So you have the physical properties of the hammer, you have the physical properties of the string, its thickness, length, etc. You combine that with the physical properties of the other strings nearby for resonance, with the soundboard, with the piano itself, so many different factors. And with the same program, you can then emulate any single piano, including historical pianos like your pianofortes and fortepianos and harpsichords and harps as well, because it's quite similar, actually, just using fingers instead of hammers to play the key or play the strings. And so it's quite a nice. It doesn't take up much space on your computer. It doesn't seem to use a lot of. It does use a lot more resources, of course, of the CPU than a sample-based player, but of course it is a lot lighter on the rest of the computer, and it sounds really good, and you can make your own piano. So what I realized, I was playing around with this. I actually had two versions of this now. I had Piano Tech 4 and Piano Tech 5, and I noticed in Piano Tech 4, it was possible to make what I call a hyper resonant piano, one that just keeps reverberating, not really reverberate, actually, it resonates, because if you push down a C on your piano, of course all the other C's, if you have the damper pedal off, all the other C's will resonate with it, and also the ones that are all your sympathetic strings, so your fifth, one octave above and the fifth above, they will resonate, and so it will resonate according to the harmonic series, and it creates quite an interesting sound. So in Piano Tech 4, you can make a piano that resonates for a really long time. So what you hear in this piece is not reverb. There might be a tiny bit of it. I'm not sure how much I put in, but very little. And just a light sprinkle on top. And the rest is just the resonance of the piano, and it also blooms a little bit as well, which I think is really nice. And the cover for this one, I'll just say a little bit about that, because the cover designs are becoming more and more important as well as we progress through my Bandcamp catalog. This picture actually for me is very similar to the sound of the music, because it's that sort of very gentle, just rolling sea. It's not really waves, it's just sort of a surface that's in motion. And I put the text on top here because and it used the same colors as from the picture. And it's one of those things that I find really relaxing. It's sitting by the seaside, and it's like this. It's moving a little bit, not entirely still, because that can be a bit boring, to be honest. It's moving a little bit, and it's very relaxing. And this piece has that same kind of tempo to it. I think the same kind of flow to it as the feeling of watching sort of shimmering sunlight in gently moving water, and it's one of those pieces that make me, as I said, sleep and relax. So let's listen to a bit of that. yeah, I think that's enough of that for now. I would recommend listening to the whole piece because it is, yeah, it's quite an interesting progression, I think. Another thing I was doing in this piece was when I was refining it later, I was trying to figure out what is the minimum number of notes you need to hit and when for the chord progression actually to be defined as well. So it was quite an interesting exercise from that point of view as well. So I quite like this one. It's one of my favorites for listening to myself. I know some people don't listen to their own music so much, but I like doing it. Next one is also quite interesting for a very different reason. I was playing around with different time signatures as well, and for a few of my songs, on my tracks, I've actually tried to do a 9/8 time signature, which I think is very interesting because what happens when you do that is you get sort of a triplet swing kind of feel to the music very easily, even without using swing or triplets. And once you add swing or triplets, of course, you're starting already to sound a little bit more jazzy. And I think this sort of goes in and out of a, what's it called again? A B flat 9 chord, I think. And also I'm sort of adding some sort of counter on sort of harmony on top as well as the track goes along. The title is, I'm not sure. I don't think actually, I don't know how I ended up on the title again, but I wasn't sort of sure about this one because I just didn't know what to call it, and it just became a sort of random thing almost. For the design of this, it's quite a simple design, but it's quite a nice text design, I think, because of the way the letters are going together. I think it works really well, and the major letters a little bit bigger than the main words, a little bit bigger than the and is. So let's just hear that one a bit as well. Quite a short piece actually. I might play the whole thing. Let's see. Okay, I'll just play the whole thing there because it's so short. No, I quite like that sound you get just around 2 minutes and 2 seconds there. It's very jazzy, but it's not really jazz, I guess. But it just sounds a bit jazzy, the whole track. It's also one of my favorites for listening to. It's a bit short, but I quite like it. So 9/8, that was sort of the. So a few of the different things here actually are. These tracks are sort of ideas I had that are sort of made into a track, like the 9/8 or the slow tempo and the resonant piano. And this track here called Echoes has another idea I had because I was playing around with a delay effect on when I was playing piano, and I thought, oh, that sounds quite nice actually on piano. And delays, they sound really nice on sort of percussive sounds, especially percussive sounds that also have a decay, like piano sounds is. And I was thinking, what if you played piano and instead of having a delay sound on it, you actually re-hit the keys and made your own delay? In which case you can also vary the tempo on different notes. You don't have to do all the same because it's not processed through a delay processor. It's actually played on the piano, just that it's hitting a little bit weaker every time. You can do it in different rhythms. And that idea turned into the song called Echoes, where I'm doing that. And I think that's quite an interesting one again. It's not my favorite melody, but I like the concept of it and the echo effect you can actually get playing on the piano itself. You don't have to add anything to it. So I'll just quickly go on. Now, maybe the cover is... this one worked really well because the letters were able to... I was able to... This is one of my favorite text designs, actually, of all my covers, because I was able to merge the letters while still retaining legibility. So yeah, I quite like that one. So you can see it's actually, that's not a bad melody. It's okay. Just hang on, I got a notification here. Okay, that's fine. So yeah, so the echoes are actually part of the playing, which I thought was quite fun, and you can do different tempos to suit the phrase, as I've been doing here, and it wouldn't have sounded so nice if I did it with the delay effect. So so that was that. The next one is also really interesting, I think, because I was playing around on my keyboard, and or actually I wasn't doing it on the keyboard. I think at the time I was actually on we got an electric piano, electronic piano in our sitting room, and I was playing around with suspended chords. So what happens if you take a normal chord, a normal major chord, and you go to the sus2 chord, and they go back to the major chord, and you do a sus4 chord and back again, you get a really interesting sound. And I thought, ooh, that sounds really nice. So I thought I'll just make a whole melody only using a progression of major chord, sus2, major chord, sus4, and a few transpositions along the way. And so I sort of had an idea, and and I just made it. The cover here is a bit different again. I just wanted to do this style. It doesn't have anything to do with Japan or Japanese, this one. So the big character here, that is the word for waves in Japanese. I can't remember what it is now. Of course, down here, that's my name and written out in Japanese the way you would normally write it. No, it's not. That's my name, Hakon, and then it says the same as here. So it's Hakon and Waves, title of the song, and of course this is, I can't remember exactly what this is now. I think this is I can't remember exactly what it means now, but that also can be pronounced Hakon, which is but those are Japanese characters meaning something else. I think it means present time or something like that. So I just thought that was a bit of fun and a bit of grunge effect there. So it doesn't really go with this with the song though. So I might change this cover actually. I'm not sure I'm entirely happy with it now in hindsight. Because this song has a very, or tune has a very different feel to it. To me, it feels like some sort of rumbling in the distance, coming closer and closer. The rumble of marching soldiers' feet, and then the army is passing by. That's the kind of feeling it has to me, and of course, the cover doesn't really go, I think. But let's have a listen to it. Starting off quiet and then gently rising. Yeah, I'll just stop at that. So yeah, that's the general gist of it. There's a second melody line coming in towards the end as well, and then it sort of wanes off again until there's just that same progression as in the beginning and just ends on a single note in the end. Because the thing is, when you're using dust suspended chords like this, the you can't do the thing you usually do with melodies where you go sort of up to a fifth or a fifth seven and you go down again to the root chord to sort of give it that sort of tension and release and finishing off kind of feel, because there is no such thing. It just goes on forever in a way, and endless cycles. It just has to end somewhere. So yeah, quite an interesting concept, I think, and I think it worked really well. Before I continue, I'll actually take a short break. I'll be right back. So, yeah, I need to get some more water. Right, so the next one here is called Before the Morning Sun. And this is something I also did quite a bit when I was starting out making composing melodies, is that, I mean, where do you find inspiration for the melody or the rhythm? And one of the things you can do is to take a poem, and of course I have loads of those. I've written so many poems. and you sort of try to set a melody that works with the poem. And I think that's a very good way of doing it, because sometimes the choice of words themselves actually dictate whether a melody goes up or down. It dictates the rhythm, and this one I was doing something I haven't done that much in other tracks actually as well. So all the ones I've presented so far have something unique about them, and it has actually a very strong syncopation of the melody. The beat of the poem and of the playing is actually not really on the beat of the music, apart from in the sort of repeated bit in between. And so I'll just play a little bit of that. And also I'm trying to sort of match the feeling of the music as well with the words of the poem as well. So there's a little bit of a later in the poem it said, "A sudden stillness spoke of storm," and then of course then you get a little bit of sort of feeling of something that's going to happen. Yeah, so it goes on. And of course, one of the things I tried doing here is to, in the melody, there's a bit of variation between each verse. There's a slightly different rhythm. And also when you get to the point where the storm is mentioned, there's a slight sort of dissonance going on as well. And also there's another melody line coming in. So, the cover here is quite interesting too. I think there was a point when I used to take lots of pictures, and I like taking pictures of birds, of seagulls, because they're quite photogenic. And I've taken lots of pictures of seagulls, and one time I took the seagulls from every single picture I had at the time of seagulls, and I copied all the seagulls out and I made them into sort of silhouettes and put them in one picture, and that is this picture right here. Those were at the point all the seagulls I had photographed in one picture. I thought it was quite fun. Some of these are actually the same seagull more than once though. For instance, the one down here I think is the same as the one up there, and the same as, yeah, I think there's more. Some of them are more than once, but generally that's lots of seagulls, and I think it's quite an interesting picture as well. So yeah, that was quite a sort of melancholy poem and a melancholy melody as well. Now the next one is also something that is a bit unique in my collection. I'll say something about the cover first, actually. So the title is called 80 Degrees North, and I was once in the Norwegian Navy, and one of the things we do in the Norwegian Navy is we try to sail past 80 degrees north. And if you know your geography, you know there's not many places you can do that. In fact, I think there may only be, or there certainly used to be only one place in the world you could do that safely, in a non-icebreaker class ship. And that is close to the Isles of Svalbard, the archipelago of Svalbard, which is part of Norway. It's quite far north. Used to be right at the edge of the Arctic ice sheet, and because of the Gulf Stream coming up from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up past the British Isles and past Norway and up along the coast, the water would be so warm that in summer you would be able to sail up to about 81, 82 degrees north and safely without too much pack ice floating around. When I was in the Navy, we went to Svalbard once. We were supposed to go twice, but that's another story. Didn't happen the second time. And the picture in this cover is actually from Svalbard. It's very typical mountain shape. On Svalbard, you have these very sort of triangular, almost pyramid-shaped mountains, and the main island of Svalbard is called Spitsbergen, which of course means pointy mountain in Dutch. It's from Dutch, I believe. And it's quite a fascinating geography there. See, it's quite snowy there, because this would have been in late August, early September, of course. So that's the end of the summer there already. And this is a piece that I composed and played on the Teenage Engineering OP1. So this is another synth piece now. And I did it actually with sampled sound, rather than using the sound engines in the OP1 itself. These are actually sampled sounds from a synthesizer by Uhe software called Diva. And Diva is one of those, or perhaps the best or most popular synthesizer that is digital, that is on the computer, that sounds like an analog synthesizer. And then I sampled it on the OP1 and I played it on the OP1, and I made this little melody, which I think is quite nice. And also quite a relaxing melody to me anyway. So let's hear it. Starting with a wind effect there, which I quite like. Stop at that. The rest is pretty much the same, except of course in the end it goes on a different note at the end of the phrase to sort of finish it off. And yeah, quite a nice little piece. Very simple arrangement, just that bass strings, the sort of trumpety synth sound, and the wind effect at the beginning and the end. Yeah, and I quite like this cover as well. The photo that this was taken from is of course taken on film originally, and of course it's a bit grainy, but I think I added more grain as well to make it look even sort of more vintage, as it were, and also increase the contrast. Yeah. Now the next one is one of my most played videos on YouTube. Is me playing this. This is an improvisation that I made when I was so this is using a virtual instrument called Jubal Flute by Embertone, and I was playing on my electronic wind instrument, which I had for a while. The reason I don't have it anymore is I did not enjoy playing on it as much as I thought I would, and also it has some possibilities that I quite like, but then again, most of the stuff I can do with it, it sounds, I'd rather be playing a recorder or a real flute, and also when I play my instrument, I can do a lot of the same expression as well as I can with the wind instrument. So So Born on the Breeze, it's a sampled flute, probably a kind of Native American flute, and of course I could have played this on a real Native American flute because I have some of those. I should really make more music with them now that I have more options of arranging and composing. But I quite like this one, and it just happened because I was just trying Jubal flute for the first time, I think, and I was sitting down and I was just playing this, and this just happened. I quite liked it, and other people quite liked it, and I did get quite a good feedback on it, and it's still one of my most played videos. I think it's the second most played video on YouTube, is the one where I improvise this piece. And one of the reasons it's become such a popular one isn't just to do with me, it's because Embertone, the people who make Jubal Flute, they actually put a link to this video on their website, so people get to it from there. So let's just have a listen to this. Another relaxing piece, I think. I think that's enough for now. I don't want to make this video too long. It's going to be really long. I can't make short videos anymore. It doesn't happen. So yeah, it's a nice, relaxing, sort of meditative piece. For me, it was quite nice doing that. I wasn't expecting that to happen when I sat down to play. Just sometimes these things happen, and I quite enjoyed that. So yeah. The next one is another sort of jazz-y kind of piece, not really jazz again, in a sort of similar vein to For the Night is Dark. And the cover picture here also, I think, is very interesting. I'm not sure. If you look at it closely, you might see what it is. Now, imagine if, so there's a dark background and there's something moving, sort of skin-colored moving in the front there. You might sort of spot something looking a little bit finger-like. So what I did was, this is a photo I took when I was doing a long exposure, probably 1 second. And I was just moving my hand in front of the camera. And this is one of the pictures that came out that I think looked really nice. So it's my hand moving in front of the camera at a long exposure, and of course there was light on the hand, so of course that's quite well exposed, even though it's been moving around. So yeah, but it looks quite abstract, and I really like that. And I used the colors of the picture for the text to sort of bring that out. I'm using usually I sample colors from the image, or I try to use a kind of a complementary contrast for that. So let's just listen to that a little bit. do the whole thing. Yeah, so that's nice, short. The title, it just sort of, the melody, it's sort of, when I don't know how to title a song, sometimes I take a little phrase from the melody and I'm sort of trying to find words that would fit if it was a song that was sung. So the last phrase, I am here right now, well, it sort of works. In my head, it works anyway. Oh, yes, so here is another interesting one. This cover, first of all, is the background is a picture I made in a program on that only exists on Mac, actually, called Artmatic, which is sort of mathematical generative art. Quite interesting things. And I made it a lot darker and a sort of nice, deep indigo blue, because that looks really nice with the gold on top. Now, this looks a bit sort of high-tech and modern, but this is one of my piano pieces that is a sort of Baroque style kind of piece. You could sort of imagine this being played in the 1700. And I do believe, if I remember correctly, that also the piano sound I'm using for this, most of my piano music now, I'm using a very similar piano sound for all of them. But this one, I've tried to make it a little bit more sort of that sort of slightly more bright, sort of early piano sound, slightly shorter decay on the resonance, things like that. And I think this is quite an interesting melody again. And of course, one of the things about Baroque music is that even though you can sort of define it by chords, of course, the chord is, if you remove the chords in the background, if you just play the melody, you can still hear the chords really well. And also, I did one interesting thing. I actually might play the whole thing because this is quite short now. So I'm also doing one modulation, and also I'm changing the length of one note towards the end, which really adds interest, I think, to it, because when you have a very sort of Baroque style music, it's a lot of time it's just sort of on the beat, on the beat, on the beat. So it's nice to get that little change suddenly where a note actually goes across the bar line, which doesn't happen very often. You have the same thing in Ode to Joy by Beethoven, where he sort of goes across a bar line, which adds a lot of interest to what otherwise would have been a very simple theme. So let's just hear this. Yeah, so Another variation there was one time actually there was a double note instead of a single note as well, just to vary. Those little variations make a big difference when you have that kind of style of music, I think. There's going to be another one in a sort of similar vein coming up shortly, but first there is one called "The Wind Is All Quiet," and this reminds me a bit of "Before the Morning Sun" because it's a similar kind of melody. I think this is in 5/4 time, so which I haven't used that much, but it makes it a little bit more interesting, I think. And again, this was made with a poem in mind, so I had a poem that I wanted to just, well, I used that as a starting point for the melody, and also trying to get that sort of right kind of feeling of melancholy maybe into it. A lot of my poems are melancholy because they were written at the time when I was a bit more melancholy than I am now. And I think being melancholy actually helps when you want to try to write poems, and certainly when you want to write poems for the first time. If you're all satisfied and happy and jolly, then it's harder to write. If you are feeling miserable and depressed and heartbroken and melancholy, then of course you have a lot more to write about, especially if you can't find any way to express those things through normal means, or you can't feel like you can't talk to people about it. But you need to get it out of your system, and writing poetry can be really therapeutic, as it was for me. So let's just listen to that. Oh yeah, maybe I can say a little bit about the cover, of course. Very nice, sort of flat, classic kind of design there. Also the colors, a bit little vintage looking. Sort of the main idea here was to make the anchor part of the cue in quiet. It took me ages to get this looking right because if it's too big, then it doesn't look right. If it's too small, it doesn't look right. And this anchor is one that I designed myself as well. Other things here, the stars. There's a bottle which is mentioned in the poem, and a little sailing ship there, and the moon. So this poem actually came to me. I'll just say a little bit about that. I was working in the Navy at the time, and I was walking to the quay early in the morning to my ship on the base. And just before you get to the main pier, there's you go through a tunnel, and as I went through it, I sort of saw all the morning mist on the water, and it was shrouding the ships on the quay, so you could hardly see them. And then the words just came to me. You can see the poem right here. The wind is all quiet, the fog a white veil that nuptially covers the virgin white sail. So of course, I got the image of a sailing boat rather than a frigate, a modern frigate, because it's a bit more romantic, isn't it? So let's just listen to that. Yeah, and it sort of repeats like that mostly. So yeah, it's a bit. I don't know. I think the music maybe sounds a little bit more somber than the lyrics of the poem does, but it just happened like that. I think I was unusually. This is a melody that I was when I made this. I wasn't. Most of my melodies are composed. I've sort of done the chord progression and the melody together, and usually starting with a chord progression, and then I modify the chord progression as I've changed the melody. And this one, I was just humming to myself, trying to find a melody that fit, and then I was trying to find a chord progression that fit with that, and that was actually quite tricky. There's one of those sort of almost dissonance chords in there, the ones that sort of break a little bit with the key. Uh, it was very hard to get that right. I think I tried everything, and I finally ended up on that, and I thought, okay, that sounds just the way I want it. But I couldn't find it. It took me a long time to find that one chord that would go with the melody and with the feeling of it as well. Now this is one I did 2 years ago. Actually, I haven't composed that much since, but I really should. But of course, I've done other stuff as well. So this is also the only cover I'm using the my name Hakon there. Some point because it looks really nice, I think. And again, this background is made in Artmatic on a Mac. When I used to have a Mac, it's been a few years now. Well, I still have it. It just doesn't work anymore. And when I was making this, I was sort of thinking something. This was quite early. This was in January, but of course there was something about the weather at the end of January in 2018. There was some warm days, and you sort of feel, oh yeah, you feel like spring is on its way, even though it is still winter. And of course there was still quite a bit of winter left at the time. It was quite a cold winter 2 years ago. Very cold winter. But there were some warm days at the end of January, and and the sunlight was sort of starting to feel a little bit more like spring was on its way. And then I wrote this song, which sounds a little bit like a sort of a, when I wrote it, it sort of feels a bit like a sort of a courtly dance. You can imagine from from like Jane Austen or something like that. And I was thinking about that, and probably this melody works with some kind of sort of classical sequence dance thing. So yeah, let's just have a listen to it. Let's see. Right, sorry about that. I got a phone call. So that was that song, and it's a bit sort of dancey. And I let the whole thing play because I got distracted by a phone call. So the next tune is a synthesizer tune. And one thing I was doing, of course, I did it with this one as well, although that's a different version. Sometimes when I do these synthesizer tunes, I also make a piano version, and of course I quite like the piano version of this one. But this is the the one that started it, the one that I made first, I made this in very similar fashion to I Am a Long Way From Home, starting out just playing around with the synthesizers on my computer, and also trying to sort of doing different things with arpeggiators and sequences, trying to make something happen, and then it sort of all managed to match together. It's quite sort of full on in sound, this one. It might be a little bit, it's not that much sort of contrast of volume and amount of sound, but I think it sort of works for this one as well. So let's just have a listen to that. Quite like the cover here as well. Again, it's an automatic piece. I like how I did the writing. It's quite, I think that's quite nice. Yeah, I think that's enough for this one. So yeah, so I quite like that thing when that high piercing sound comes in right there just before I ended it there. Yes, it sounds really good with piano as well, actually. I might do the piano version on Bandcamp at some point. The next one is another of those piano pieces I made where I had sort of an idea when I started it. First thing about the cover here, this is a picture from Glasgow. There's this wouldn't be here anymore, I think, because this was part of Queen Street Station, just outside Queen Street Station, I believe, and there's a kind of a railing or something that goes downstairs, and there's this metal bar that I took a close-up of, and it had a really nice sort of contrasty shadow at the time, and I lined up the text there, so it almost looks like there's a almost looks like there's a hole in the bar, and the text on the light goes through, and then of course it shines on. So I really like this cover, actually. It's very it's one of my best designs, I think. Now the idea I had for this one was that instead of having a 9/8 beat or a 5/4 time signature, why not sort of try to make a piano piece where you changed where in the bar you had the accents and where you had the phrases, so you actually make the phrases slightly different size to the bars, and make it almost sound like it has a kind of a sort of a triplet or a jazzy kind of feel to it, even though it's actually just a 4/4 time. And then of course that also made me sort of presented itself with the name Irregularities, because it's not regular in the way it sort of works against the time signature. Let's just have a listen to that. Yeah, I think that's enough for that one. So yeah, so that's almost sort of that sort of jazzy feel, but without triplets, without swing, technically. So yeah, and a really nice cover design, I think, if I say so myself. The next one is, let's see. Is my internet dying? Okay, it seems. Oh, there it is. Okay, so Endless Voyage, I call this one. I think this has some really nice sort of like what I was mentioning earlier, how the chords and the melody work together. This one has that too, because it has chord changes where the note stays roughly the same, and so the note is defined by the chord rather than by itself in relation to the other notes that is part of the main melody, and it has a nice sort of drive to it. And so when I made it, after I'd made it, I thought it was an endless voyage because it feels like it could keep going forever. And so I thought that was quite nice. And then I was looking at my photos, trying to find something that sort of conveys a kind of a voyage or a journey or a road or something like that, and I couldn't really find anything. But then I found a picture I had, a very symmetrical picture of tractor tracks through a grain field, and I thought, okay, that sort of works because it sort of looks like it sort of goes on, could go on forever. Of course, it doesn't really. I mean, it ends right above the top of the picture, but when you crop it like that, it looks like it goes on forever. And for the title there, for the text, I typed that on a typewriter and scanned it and put it on the cover. So I quite like that aesthetic of typewriter text, and I'm going to use that more, I think, for my covers. So yeah, let's have a little listen to that as well. Yeah, I think that's the rest is quite similar. Some of you might have noticed that when I make these short piano compositions, very often it is similar to the kind of construction you would have in a pop song, because you have a chorus. Sorry, you have a verse, you have a chorus, you have a verse again. Sometimes you go into something that's a bit like a bridge, where you have a key change, and then you go back into the verse or chorus or both towards the end. And I think that's quite a nice way to construct things, because you get a quite nice sort of contrast and interest and dynamics through a melody. And it works really well for these sort of melodic pieces. Now we're getting closer to my sort of YouTube stuff, because lately I've been doing more stuff on most of my music has been almost a sort of a sideshow to what I've been doing on YouTube. I've been doing it while I've been making videos on YouTube, and this comes up now to my second improvised piece. This autumn I bought a Linstrument, which is it's too far away for me to show you now. Basically, it's a sort of MIDI keyboard substitute, where you have a sort of a grid of pressure pads, and each one you can sort of press down, and it has pressure as well as side to side and up and down sensors, so you can do a lot of expression with it. And it sounds absolutely amazing with things like wind instruments. I think, especially wind instruments, but also sort of things like string instruments, particularly those, because you get this similar kind of expression as you would with a real instrument. The only thing you can't really do that easily as a wind instrument player, I would say, is trills. Is something you can do it, but it makes it more tricky because you would have to add another sensor that you use for breath pressure, and then you don't do the breath pressure on the actual keyboard. But it is possible, but it's tricky. So, and one thing I struggle with when I play any time is to play in a regular time. But when I'm using delay effects, it is easier because the delays actually give you the time of the tempo of the song, of the music, or the melody. Another thing I like doing is when I'm improvising is to use a pentatonic scale. Because the nice thing about pentatonic is it doesn't really matter where you go. You can go anywhere in the scale. It sounds nice. You can sort of start and stop anywhere, basically. But of course, usually you end up on the root note, but you don't have to. And you can also sort of go a little bit out of key as well. And if you know what you're doing, if you know, and it can sound really nice. And I'm doing that in this piece as well. So, so this just started. I was just playing around with my instrument, and I was making a video of me playing. And this piece just happened, and I really liked it, and it's one of my favorites to listen to again. Just like some of those other ones I mentioned before. So it's pentatonic scale, a little bit of going out of key at one point, and also it's the delay effect, which I just think adds a bit to it, and it sort of gives it a bit sort of drive and momentum, and also it gives you the tempo and the rhythm as well. Let's just give a quick listen to that. Yeah, I think I'll just stop at that so this video doesn't get even longer. So yeah, on the cover here, I didn't say anything about that. This is a photo of myself, or my shadow, that I took just outside the place I used to live, back in sort of 1995 until 1998, I think. A very nice little place. Well, tiny place. Quite an old house. I was living just out off to the right. There is a window, and of course I was living there downstairs, so it was half underground as well. Nice place, nice, amazing location, right in the middle of town, but nice and quiet at the same time. So yeah, I don't know why that sort of struck a chord with me when I I was thinking of a cover for this, but pentatonic, I was thinking pentatonic scale. Scale means stairs as well, so one, two. So yeah, it's just it sort of worked for me, and of course it was a picture of me, which I don't have that many pictures of myself. So and this was also, as you can see, back when I had hair as well. And I might have been a little bit thinner. Anyway, now the next two pieces, for those of you who watch my videos, who not everyone is into experimental music, and I didn't think I was either until I got my first proper synthesizer, which was the Kilpatrick Phenol, because the Phenol it's a patchable synthesizer. Actually, I can show you that because it's right over here. So it's Phenol. It looks like this, and you have all these little patch points here where you can put cables. And the thing is, this thing does not make a single sound until you've patched it up. So it's actually a modular synthesizer, not semi-modular. There's no pre-connected paths through it. So you have to, well, it helps to know how a synthesizer works, how the signal flow is, and but you can do really interesting things with it because you can combine the signals in different ways. You can take a single starting point and patch it in different places, and things can modulate themselves and each other. And there are two oscillators, so you get quite a lot of variation in it. And when I got that, and the first time I tried it out, it just immediately it becomes more sort of experimental sounding, the music of it. And I was trying to sort of do different ways of adding little sequences and arpeggios and things to it, which you can do, and which can sound quite nice too. And sometimes I just go completely random and see what happens. It's very fun to work with. So the next piece here might not be to everyone's taste. I know lots of people, they don't like sort of non-melodic, non-tonal, non-melodic, music that's just a bit sort of quirky and weird. But so it's 26 minutes long because it's quite a lot of time. Usually I sort of start from no patches to patching it completely. The cover here, I'll just tell you a little bit about that. So this is from what's it called again? There's a museum in Edinburgh where you have all these sort of optical illusions and things like that. The Camera Obscura, I think they call it. It's a very nice tourist attraction right at the top of the Royal Mile, just before Edinburgh Castle. And they have all these nice little lighting things. This is sort of one of those glass balls with a sort of rod in the middle that creates lightning when you touch it. So I was touching it and taking a picture at the same time. And this came out really well, actually. I have a few other pictures from the same place that also came out rather well, that I find quite interesting, sort of nice abstract or semi-abstract pictures. And I also liked how the hand was sort of silhouetted like that. And this sort of, I thought it was a bit reminiscent of cave paintings, how you have on so many caves, you have the image of a hand and you got the sort of color around it because they've used the hand as a stencil by sort of blowing pigments and paint through the hand. And I thought this was the glow around the hand. It sort of looked a bit like that. So I thought it was a nice sort of way to connect the old with the new as well. So let's just listen to this. I might have to skip a little bit just to see if I can get you some interesting parts of the music now. So let's just see. Because it usually starts a bit quiet, so... Actually, I think I'll just skip a little bit to... Oh, there we go. So it starts... So it's got a sequence going there. Let's skip a little bit. Sounds relatively weird. Fade out at the end, I think, if we want to do these. So as that fades out, this the synthesizer can sound quite acidic, quite harsh, quite brutal, quite sort of gritty as well. So yeah, it's quite an interesting sounding synthesizer. Not to everyone's taste, this kind of music, so I'm just not spending too much time on it now. And the next one is also the cover actually is from also from the camera Obscura in Edinburgh. And you might be forgiven for thinking this is a composite photo, but this is a single photograph. It's taken as, and it just, that is what it looks like, because there is reflection in, I think, there's more than one glass surface. And so you can see my legs are up here, and there's somebody else's feet are over here, and there's some strange lights and reflections going on here that just turn into this absolutely amazing abstract photo, I think. And it's one of my favorite abstract photos that I definitely wasn't planning to take. I usually don't plan to take abstract photos, they just happen. And this is another experimental piece, and it's even more experimental, I think, than the previous one. 24 minutes long, and just do a quick listen to that as well, hopefully not scaring too many people away. Sequence is coming in very shortly now. And the second oscillator is doing its own thing. I'll leave it there because it's not for everyone, but it's quite an interesting piece, I think, and there's some interesting themes going through there in the sequenced phrases, and I mean, this synthesizer, it's amazing how much sound you can get out of just this one thing, because everything, all the sounds you hear in these two pieces are from that one synthesizer and nothing else. The only thing I've added is a little bit of reverb on top. Just a tiny bit, actually. It doesn't need a lot to, stand out. Sorry, I've been drinking so much water, I'm burping now. Now, another thing. Oh. Okay, perfect timing. We were offline briefly for maintenance. Oh, that's interesting timing. Well, it's almost like they knew I was making a video now. So I wonder how long they're going to be off for now. Oh, well, that wasn't long. Okay, so as some of you might have noticed if you looked at my videos, I've done quite a few Xenodream animations, and I'm going to do a separate video probably about Xenodream at some point, because it is quite complicated to explain what Xenodream is and does. In short, it's a kind of fractal image design software, and if you look at it, you might not be able to wrap your head around it at all at first. It takes a little bit of effort to get into, but it creates some really interesting, potentially some really interesting images, and I've made lots of fascinating stuff with it. And one of the things it can do is make animations. It can make 3D animations as well, which is what I've been doing usually for sort of cross-eyed viewing. Every time I make animations, I also add a musical score to it. And the last few times I've made animations, I've actually started with the music sometimes, and then I've sort of, because it dictates how long the animation is going to be and how many frames I have to create to make the animation. So, but for this one, I did, for some of them I used synthesizer pieces because it sort of goes with the style of the graphics. But for this one, I was thinking of this piano piece that I had. And instead of making it just piano like I've usually done with the other ones, I wanted to make it sound a little bit more like a jazz trio or jazz quartet, rather, in this case. So I got the double bass, I got the sort of nice jazz drums, just nice sort of smooth jazz drum kit, and also there's a muted trumpet coming in as well, and so I quite like this one, and also I think quite like the beat that I got for the beat for the drums. It doesn't actually change throughout the song, I think, because it actually works because the melody is syncopated in some places, which means it changes the emphasis of the beats. So it sounds like the drum pattern is varying a little bit when it's actually the melody that's varying. So I quite like that effect as well. So let's just have a listen to that. By the way, again, this is a poem that's, no, sorry, it's a melody that's based on a poem. I've got a sonnet I wrote many years ago, probably in 1994 or 95, called The Third Full Moon. So this melody actually goes with a sonnet, Shakespearean sonnet, in terms of syllables and rhythm, and it is possible to sing it, I suppose, with this melody. I'm not sure how that would sound though, but that's a starting point for the creativity. It doesn't usually go necessarily so well with the music afterwards, but let's just have a listen. Yeah, I think that's enough. So yeah, so there's sort of jazzy, smooth jazzy kind of sound there, for a melody that's written for a sonnet. So right, yeah, cover design is of course this is the animation from the animation that I had. It was basically this tree growing from sort of a thin tree to sort of a fuller tree, and it's all sort of made of these sort of ribbony spirals. It's quite a fascinating one. Now another thing I've been doing for the first time lately is I've actually included poems in my musical pieces, and this just happened by chance, as it were, because recently I started working a little bit more with sort of musique concrète, which is just French for concrete music, which means as opposed to abstract music. Abstract music, I mean, normal music is abstract because it's trying to express something, but it does it by something that isn't directly related to what the expression is about. So you can express emotion with a trumpet or a piano, but of course it's quite far removed from the actual emotion or from the physicality of reality. So Musique Concrète was a French movement where they would make music based on actual sounds, recorded sounds. So you would record a train or people walking and talking and bumping into things and walking downstairs, and you would sort of cut these things together and you would make patterns with it. And so in a way, the music might express something, but it might also be made out of the sounds that it is telling a story about, which makes it more concrete than the abstract music of normal instruments. So I've been trying to go into that a little bit, and also sort of ambient music is very closely related to concrète in a way, because you often use recordings and you change the tempo to make the sort of textures and atmospheres and canvases, I suppose you also call it, when you sort of have a layer of sound that you sort of build things on top of. So I've been doing different things like that, and one of the things that I'm also mixing in electronic sounds as well with synthesizers, and which I do in this one. And I've done two pieces so far where I've actually put in lyrics as well, or put in a poem. The first one I did Robert Herrick, to the virgins to make most of time, or whatever the name of the poem is. It's the one that goes, "Gather ye rosebuds while ye may," which is the poem that is in the beginning of Dead Poets Society. And in this one, I haven't uploaded that one. And in this one, I'm doing Emily Dickinson, "It Feels a Shame to Be Alive." And Emily Dickinson has lots of really nice, very short, succinct poems, I think, that lend themselves rather well to this kind of style. The cover design again, I've actually just mirrored upside down. I put the text upside down for the title. It's still sort of possible to read, and the background is that from the animation that I made in Xenodream, that is sort of almost like a sort of smoky kind of effect that I quite like. And I didn't make it in 3D because I didn't feel like it needed to be in 3 dimensions, this one. So this is one of my most recent ones. And I might skip ahead a little bit in this one, just get started. And when I do these kind of pieces, I'll probably make a video about how my workflow is when it comes to both recording and processing for these kinds of pieces. Let's have a little listen to this. Quite slow to start with. I think I'll just skip ahead a bit. Got some more rhythmical elements coming in here. Some noises from my kitchen. Also from the garden with birds singing. Taking that in. rain there as well.
It feels a shame to be alive when men so brave are dead.
So yeah, and also I did a bit of a synthesizer there. The thing is, it was doing on the top of, there was a beeping of the kitchen timer, and then I first took the synthesizer and I sort of started layering it with that beeping, and then I made a little melody on that, and sort of increased the tempo and added a bit more. But of course, when it started doing that sort of ba-dum 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 ba-dum, it's I've already defined a melodic progression before that, but then that stops. It doesn't progress any further, and that's done on purpose. It sort of wants to feel like it's some kind of unfulfilled promise of something that came before, and then it just goes into that humdrum same pattern over and over again until that fades out. It's a very deliberate choice. I could have progressed further. I could have made a whole melody out of that starting point, but I didn't want to in this case, because it was part of the expression I was going for in this piece. I might take the same theme and use it for something else another time, but so yeah. But it needs to go with that "it feels a shame to be alive" kind of theme. I mean, that's sort of something that you feel is your life might feel unfulfilled because you compare yourself to others who've done great things and sacrificed their lives for great things, whereas you feel like your life doesn't mean anything. So so it really goes with the poem, I think. So yeah, so that's a combination of different sounds from the kitchen. There's rain, there's birds singing, there's some different noises I make when I'm doing dishes in there as well, I believe. So yeah, different things on the kitchen timer. And many of the noises and the sounds, I slow them down to make that sort of background tapestry. And also there's a sort of tape or vinyl noise as well going all the way through. So done a few of those. I'll just do this one before I do the last one, not the second to last one. Now this is actually an album, and the reason is that it's a long piece that I had to split up because of size limitations on Bandcamp, which is okay, I suppose. I mean, chunks of 28 minutes and 43 seconds, that's sort of equally divided. What I did here, I recorded my washing machine when I was doing laundry, and it makes lots of noises, and it changes throughout the program as well, and it sort of starts and ends with some beeping, and I layer that with some other things as well, and this is quite a long meditative piece, and every now and again something sort of comes in at quite long intervals. Actually, some other bits and pieces come in that sort of add interest to it. Maybe I'll just play something from the end here, because I think I've got most of the elements in there. So if I just do part 5. That's the sound of the washing machine there, and then slow down again to sort of make it a little rumbly, deeper sound. I'm also using the rain sound. I think it might be the same one as in the previous piece. There's also alarm. The kitchen alarm is used again in this one, but I'm using 3 kitchen alarms around the recorder so I can get a stereo image. Let's see, I'll move it. This is one of the quiet bits, nothing's happening. And then I just do this bit here. So also added a bit of sort of piano sound. And this is just an improvised piano piece, and also added a bit of violin sound as well. That goes with the improvised piano. course, towards the end here, of course, is the spin cycle, so it's going to be so the noise of the washing machine actually goes a bit louder. I'm not sure if the violin is on this particular bit. Now. There's a drone going on there. That's from my K-oscillator. Yep. I think that's pretty much it. I'm not sure if the rest is just to fade out. Anyway, yeah, so that's the piano and the violin bit that I sort of put in. So, but it's quite a long piece, and there's lots of periods of not much happening, which makes it not a nice sort of ambient background music piece as well. This is the second cover design I made for this one. I wasn't happy with my first one because I made a video on YouTube and I was just filming the video on YouTube I filmed walking past a fence that was creating really sharp shadows on the ground, and I processed it in different ways and I cycled that all the way through. But then I thought this is a washing machine, so I thought I wanted something to give that sort of circular look to it. And then I had this photo here, which is of the ceiling of the Pantheon in Rome, where there's an oculus. There's a round hole in the middle where the sunlight comes in, and of course, depending what time of day it is, it will shine on different parts of this circular building. So that's the sort of beam of light coming up there. That's from the sunlight passing through the oculus. So that's the one I used for this one. I quite like the design of that. Now the last one I've got the title Fractin Bicret. I suppose I should be pronounced it in French. which is sort of a portmanteau, mixed word of fractal, ambient, and concrete. Because usually when I do these pieces, it's not fully, I mean, it is ambient, but it's also, I like to sort of add the fact that I've got these sort of concrete elements, the recordings into it as well. So I like calling the genre ambicrete, like ambient and concrete mixed together. And of course, in this case, this was just the title of the video, where I had an animation using this Julia set, which is a bit more familiar to people than the Xenodream stuff. This is the inverse of the Mandelbrot set, or one of the inverses of a point in the Mandelbrot set. And I'm using different, I can't remember exactly which sounds I had in this one now, so I'm gonna have a little listen and I'll say something about it. It's another experimental piece, this one. Starts with the sound of a tape recorder. And then there's the sound effect I got from some tape noise there, from the noise from the end of a tape on a reel-to-reel recorder that I've turned into a rhythm. The click is also a sound from the reading head of a reel-to-reel recorder, just as the tape end passes the read head. That's the sound it makes. Move forward a little bit. Although Bandcamp is really slow in catching up with this one. There's more sounds going on now. Something from a typewriter. There's rain noise again, I think. Various noises that I've processed, slowed down. This is a typewriter ding at the end there. And the hum in the background, that is sort of the layered drone of my own voice that I did many years ago for a different piece. I think that's enough actually of this one. So there's lots of things going on there, and like in many sort of ambient pieces, there's sort of lots of layers of different things. Some things coming in and others going out. So also very experimental piece, and another mostly a concrete, I suppose, piece as well. So yeah, that actually concludes my tour of my current catalog on Bandcamp. All these songs are available to buy, and you can buy them for free if you like. You can pay as much or as little as you want, because I think that seems quite fair. I mean, people they do value creativity, and if they feel like there's a value to it, they are willing to pay for it. So I'm just leaving it up to anyone wanting to buy my music to decide how much they want to pay. So the reason I did this video, as I said early on in it, is that I wanted to just go through my catalog now before I start having another uploading spree, because then it will be a bit more of a big video going through it all if I wanted to do it. And I might sort of do a sequel to this where I go through my new things later. So yeah, that's quite a varied style, as you can see, all from medieval ballads, synthesizer music, relaxing piano music, jazzy piano music, some more upbeat synthesizer pieces, a dance tune really, and some really experimental stuff towards the end, which is what I've been doing more of lately. So I think this video is quite far long enough now, and I don't want to say too much more about it. I think so. I'll just leave it for now. And if any of you have watched all the way through, I must say thank you for watching, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you next time in whatever video is the next one I make. So goodbye for now, and have a lovely day. Bye bye.